Okay, we are now a minute in, so we will go ahead and get started. Thank you all and welcome to today's Educational Equity webinar. Today, we are going to be talking about mindful consumerism, applying anti-oppression awareness to year-end spending. It is our hope that today's conversation will help us frame how to shop, give, and donate at year end, allowing us to put our dollars where our hearts are. We do hope that today, as a participant, this will deepen your capacity to understand historical practices that have and continue to uphold and preserve systemic oppression, apply tools and strategies of anti-oppression awareness to align your spending practices and your values. Consider a range of financial choices and their impact in creating desired change. We also hope that you walk away recognizing your own power and influence in dismantling systems of oppression. We can go ahead and move to the next slide, please. So for those of you who are newly joining us today, we do want to, again, welcome you to the Educational Equity webinar series. The Office of Educational Equity is housed within the University of Phoenix, and the University of Phoenix is committed to making higher education accessible to the working adult and has built a framework where inclusion practices have been organically embedded and are at the forefront of our efforts. The university promotes this by providing resources to build cultural competency and career preparedness. Through community efforts, we build partnerships and create engagement that will provide resources and networks for our students and alumni, and obviously the general public. And that's why we're welcoming you all here today. We can go to the next slide. So we do want to let you know that we are going to kick off the year with a webinar entitled Modeling Inclusive Leadership in a Post-COVID Era. We thought it would be a good time to start off 2022. I have to start familiarizing myself with saying that year. But we wanted to kick off the year next year with an opportunity to look back at how leaders have been managing through the pandemic. Also, we want to talk about what is their path forward. Although we're not completely out of the pandemic, I know we've entitled this post-COVID era. We do want to talk about now that we've moved out of this time period in which diversity, equity, and inclusion became somewhat of a trend. We want people to remain focused on how important that is and aligning it with their strategic goals and their path forward. Please join us because we have some fantastic speakers representing some major organizations that will be joining us. So here's a QR code to make it easy for you if you just want to hold your phone up to that and scan it. We also have the link to register in the chat, and we'll be bringing this information back up at the end. I will now turn it over to Saray.
Thank you. And thank you everyone for being here with us today. So a little housekeeping before we get started. First, let's definitely set the stage for today's session. Listed here, you're going to see a few guidelines that we believe are essential for fostering respectful conversations. We value your participation in potentially uncomfortable discussions, as we believe this definitely reinforces our willingness to learn and grow. We encourage you to share your experiences and perspectives in the chat box. We ask all participants to contribute to an atmosphere of mutual respect and sensitivity. And in addition, we definitely welcome you to to connect with one another, share your LinkedIn profiles, share any resources that come to mind related to today's topic. We definitely want to make this a learning experience for all, and we believe that we can learn from each other as well. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, as you hear our speaker today, please type them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be reviewing the questions throughout and also have an opportunity, if time allows, to bring them up at the end. And now, before we begin our going into the session, I definitely want to highlight that we want to honor and raise awareness of important equity, diversity, and inclusion dates and milestones within being the month of December, Universal Human Rights Month. And in the interest of inclusivity, we want to ensure that we are doing our best to recognize all such dates, but we do acknowledge there may be some that we have missed and invite you all to share in the chat if there's an observance aligned within the month of December that we have not listed here. Please include details along with a link or resource where we can learn more about its significance. So please share. So next slide, please. I have the absolute pleasure and honor of introducing our speaker today, Malia Dunn. She's the founder and principal consultant at Malia Dunn Consulting, Inclusion Embraced, and also a dear friend, and definitely excited to have her here today. I've learned so much from her approach to education in this space. So be it through program design, leading teams in nonprofit sectors, community engagement, her career has always been rooted in the intention to do good. And along Malia's path, brave voices called her attention to practices and behaviors inconsistent with that intention, behaviors that did more harm than good. So from there, shift happened. And now Malia practices at the core of her practice, at the core of her practice are unlearning dominant cultural practices, shedding white savior complex, and demonstrating effective allyship as a true justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion Jedi specialist. So definitely want to welcome her here, Malia. And another keynote about Malia, she's an unapologetic cat person, which I love, but also holds dog people in high regard. So I believe we're all included, pet lovers, where she definitely is a true ally here. But now, without further ado, I will turn it over to my dear friend and respected colleague, Malia Dunn.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much. Yes, if you reptile lovers, bird lovers, fish lovers out there, y'all are great too. Love it. So thank you so much, Sadai. Thank you, Tandra, for getting us started. Thank you, University of Phoenix, for gathering opportunities like this so we can come together, right? Come together in ways where we can benefit from each other's knowledge. Want to invite everyone. I see, like I was looking through the chat as folks were arriving. We got so many time zones covered. I saw you in there, Hawaii. Saw like East Coast, so wherever you are in your day to day. I just want to acknowledge that we're in a period of the year, Tandra referenced it, we're 15 days away with the rest of this year. And I know this season, this time of year can bring up a lot of different things for different folks, right? Can be a lot of joy, there can be a lot of difficulty. Whatever is coming up for you right now, I just want to honor that. And I want to hold that place. And I want us to think about just how sometimes we push against our nature. The month of December, we might all be operating still as if we could fit a full month's worth of work into a time when really there's like 2.5 weeks of viable work time. So wherever you are, whatever you're holding, I want to acknowledge that and honor it and invite you to take a few deep breaths. And as we do that, I want to also acknowledge and recognize that I'm here based in the Phoenix, Arizona area. I live, work, recreate on the unceded lands of the Akimel Odam, the Pipash, Yavapai people. And I recently learned OMA peoples of original custodians of this land, indigenous people who I appreciate their ingenuity for creating a way to live in the desert with our canal systems. And I want to acknowledge and send a lot of gratitude and appreciation to right? The indigenous people, the descendants of those ingenious folks who are with us today and who continue to thrive and survive in a country and in our world where we've continued to reckon with the history of our country. So I want to honor and give a few deep breaths, some gratitude, and recognizing there's, for me personally, still so much that I have to learn. Let's kind of move on through this. Click on the right space. So Sada, you did a lovely introduction of me. Thank you. I appreciate that. Right. Because I am a human being with so many social identities that land in a place of privilege, I've really spent my past decade plus working to understand what that means, all of the things that I didn't see previously, and honoring that there's still so many things that I don't yet see. And from that, right, I very much was raised from a very young age. There's my brother and I, we're Luke Skywalker and Wonder Woman. So yeah, we were sure that we were going to save the world from those very earliest days. And that got kind of reinforced through a range of different life experiences that shifted. And again, because of brave voices and folks saying like, Malia, I know you mean well, but this isn't working. I've really been able to pay attention and get curious and work through a lot of the emotions that came with the, but I'm a good person stuff. So that's been my life journey. And I say here, you'll see aspiring intersectional feminists, because I'm not there yet. Let me be very honest. I'm not there yet. There are things that I'm not paying attention to, or I can easily come back and look through experiences purely through my lens. And I want to keep expanding that awareness. So it's because of all of this that I come to you. Oh, hi, I see another Return Peace Corps volunteer out there. There may be many, so thank you. I just want to keep working on it and being in community. Throughout the session today, I'll be referencing some of the great content that came to me because we did an inclusive cafe on December 1st with University of Phoenix. And so when we came together in dialogue, so many more ideas and so many things that people shared of like, hey, this is what I do. And here's, I've tried this and this has really worked for me. So I've really tried to continue to gather that information to share with those of you who are here today. The wisdom of all of us here put together is always going to be greater than any single one of us. And so I hope we can model and experience that as we move through. I also want to share that, I'm not a financial expert. I am a consumer, like many of you. I will admit, I am the daughter of, my father is a retired financial planner. My mom's a retired teacher. So kind of, I think some osmosis of that came through. So here I am talking about money in a way of working through education. So who knew? But as we move through, I want to recognize that I'm very much a conduit. Like I said, I'm a DEI practitioner, but what I'm an expert on is my experience. Not an expert on everyone else's. I'm not a financial expert. I'm an expert on, here are things that I've tried. Here are things that here are some places where I've had a win and I felt like, oh, actually I can see how my money made a difference. And if I think about that cumulatively with others, that could be really powerful. So I want to really give a shout out, right, to others who have taught me, mentors, coaches, scholars, other practitioners. When something kind of clicks for me and I pay attention to, I'm like, wow, that really resonated. And I spend some time with it and then I want to share it out, right? So that hopefully things will click with each of us in different ways. And so some things that I share might really land for some of you, and some of it maybe not so much, but I hope that you'll find something that's useful as we move on through. I also want to kind of really set the tone as we move through this session is not about shoulds. It's not about this is what you should do with your money. These are the choices that you should be making to be a good ally or to be active in the system. These are considerations. I want to acknowledge that every one of us are in a range of different circumstances that influence the choices that we can make with our money. And oftentimes those circumstances trace back to systems of oppression and systems of privilege. So the things that we share today are really a jumping off point. Maybe as we look at what some of our traditional practices are, don't want to have this be a place of any shame. It's no shade, just kind of let's add some intentionality and awareness to how insidious our systems are and how we can actually find ways to be useful and to chip away at some pieces. So as you think about today, we kind of, it's December 16th. Some of you might be like, most of my year-end spending is done. Or you could have like a list of to-dos still that you're planning between the rest of the year. So sure, year-end, but we can really apply this lens to all of our spending day in, day out, right? So maybe there's something in February, or maybe there's something in June that will apply to what we've got here. But as we kind of move through today's session, I'd love for you to be thinking about maybe where are some of the places that you do have standard practices around your spending or your gifting. If we think about family meal planning, if we think about gift giving, the range of gifts that we can give to others, and thinking also about even personal appearance could even be like running to Target and getting another thing of body wash, right? All of the things that we get over time. So let's see, as we move through here, just have some things in mind so that you can kind of tap into your experiences. Oh, and I see there is a hand raised. Sarai, do we want to go that way or use the Q&A option? For those of you who do have questions, please have them come through. And that way, if there's something where I'm like, oh, I think we're going to get to that, I can name it. Or if there's something that needs clarification in the moment, I would love to capture that when it's most relevant. Sarai?
Yeah, and I think for now, to continue on to the conversation, if we can all put the questions in the Q&A box, and we'll definitely be bringing them up throughout. So John, if you can please type that in, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Awesome, great. All right, so moving on through, just to set us some context, and we'll share a little bit more, but just kind of want to think about how did we get to where we are today? Why is using an anti-oppression lens or an anti-oppression awareness, why is that even necessary? How did we get here? I'm going to share a video, which likely many of you have seen. This has been around for a while. I know folks find it useful. So let's just, if you've seen it again, I invite you to watch and listen of what might you cue into this time that you hadn't heard or heard in the same way before.
Neighborhood. All of Jamal's neighbors are African American, and all of Kevin's neighbors are white. Because Jamal's school district is mostly funded by property taxes, his school is not very well funded. His classrooms are overcrowded, his teachers are underpaid, and he doesn't have access to high-quality tutors or extracurricular activities. Kevin's school district is also funded by property taxes, so his school is very well funded. His classrooms are never crowded, his teachers are very well paid, and he has access to high-quality tutors and lots of extracurricular activities. Kevin and Jamal live only a few streets away from each other. So how come they're growing up in such different worlds with such different opportunities for success? The answer has to do with America's history of systemic racism. To understand it better, let's look at what life was like for Kevin and Jamal's grandparents. Decades after the Civil War, many government agencies started to draw maps dividing cities into sections that were either desirable or undesirable for investment. This practice was called redlining, and it usually blocked off entire black neighborhoods from access to private and public investment. Banks and insurance companies used these maps for decades to deny black people loans and other services based purely on race. Historically speaking, owning a home and getting a college education is the easiest way for an American family to build wealth. But when Jamal's grandparents wanted to buy a house, the banks refused because they lived in a neighborhood that was redlined. So Jamal's grandparents were not able to buy a home, and because colleges could prevent them from attending through legal segregation, their options for higher education were really scarce. Kevin's grandparents, on the other hand, got a low-interest loan to buy their first house and got accepted into a handful of top universities, which traditionally only accepted white students. This opened up a wealth of opportunities that they were able to pass on to their kids and grandkids. Even as late as the 1980s, an investigation into the Atlanta real estate market showed that banks were more willing to lend to low-income white families than to middle or upper-income African-American families. As a result, today, for every $100 of wealth held by a white family, black families have $5.04. A 2017 study confirms that redlining is still affecting home values in major cities like Chicago today. This explains how Kevin and Jamal inherited vastly different circumstances. Unfortunately, the story doesn't end there. A big part of systemic racism is implicit bias. These are prejudices in society that people are not aware that they have. Let's go back to Kevin and Jamal. Against all odds, Jamal manages to be the only student from his high school to get accepted into a great university, the same one that Kevin and his high school friends are attending. But after Kevin and Jamal both graduate, Jamal notices that his resume isn't drawing as much interest as Kevin's, even though they graduated from the same program with the exact same GPA. Unfortunately for Jamal, studies show that resumes with white-sounding names get twice as many callbacks as identical resumes with black-sounding names. Implicit bias is one of the reasons why the black unemployment rate is twice the rate of white unemployment, even among college graduates today. You can see evidence of systemic racism in every area of life. The disparities in family wealth, incarceration rates, political representation, and education are all examples of systemic racism. Unfortunately, the biggest challenge with systemic racism is that there's no single person or entity responsible for it, which makes it very hard to solve. So what can you do? The first thing you can do is work towards becoming more aware of your own implicit biases. What are some prejudices that you might hold that you're not aware of? Second, let's acknowledge that the consequences of slavery and Jim Crow laws are still affecting access to opportunity today. As a result, we should support systemic changes that create more equal opportunities for everyone. Increasing public school funding and making it independent from property taxes would be a great start, so that poor and wealthy districts can receive equal access to resources. Systemic problems require systemic solutions. Luckily, we're all part of the system, which means that we all have a role to play in making it better. Peace.
All right. Yeah, peace. So I like that video because it helps set the stage of right, this disproportionate accumulation of wealth and limits around accumulation of wealth. So when we're thinking about how we spend our money and where our money flows, how maybe can we disrupt the status quo, right? And if we think about how things exist today, we continue to see, right, a continued mass accumulation of wealth when we hear about, right, the one percenters, right? We'll talk about Amazon a little bit. So I think for me, the first person I always think about, right, is Jeff Bezos with, just sitting on mountains and mountains of cash. And then this shrinking and elimination of the middle class. Some of the other impact that we see is, the destruction of our planet, destruction of our lands, and then even so areas where it's destroying and extracting from sacred lands and displacing communities away from their homes. And this is happening both here in the US and globally. I see the question about the video source. We'll have that in your resources. Great question. Thank you. Happy to provide that. We also see more often than we would like, right? Denial or abuse, or some kind of creative workarounds of labor rights that often disproportionately impact women, children, immigrants, BIPOC, among others. And we also can see that, what are these large corporations and those who have more wealth are directing lobbying efforts and getting involved in decisions that are happening right at the macro level of our government. And actually not just the macro, like here in our local government, right? Who's able to put funding and lobbying toward things like limiting voting rights, limiting our access to healthcare, reproductive rights, preserving for-profit prisons and the systems that exist that do continue to kind of hold our culture in the way it is, when really what we want to be doing is disrupting. So that's kind of where things are, but how can we switch things up? When we think about using an anti-oppression lens, we have to recognize that oppression exists, and then think, how can we be a part of it? How do we equalize or rebalance? I have a coach who would often say, like, we've got privilege and marginalization. We should have these two hands. And she would say, we're not trying to flip it. We're just trying to equalize. We're just trying to take out this pattern and create a little bit more equity. So we've got anti-oppression. I also wanted to bring in the definition of anti-racism here, because I appreciated here specifically the word actively identifying. So this is a process of actively identifying and opposing racism, because I think it does require that this mindfulness, this intentionality, this action, because when we operate in our default modes, we're operating in the way we were socialized, which continues to preserve this systems of oppression that we live in, that we've inherited as we've moved through the world. Furthermore, Ibram X. Kendi would say we have to take radical choices and a radical reorientation of our consciousness. So what we learned today might feel radical for some. It might feel like just new, or like, sure, I can do that. It doesn't have to be radical. But again, we're all coming at this from a different lens. So let's think about, too, some of the ways that we get stuck or we can slide into these defaults. One is ease. When we're shopping, that all under one roof, big box store, we can get it all done. It was one trip, and that's all we needed. And here's the complexity about that, because you know what? Doing something in one trip can actually be good for the environment. And we know, we kind of talked about destruction of the Earth's resources, that our environmental justice and our climate justice is related to racial justice. So it's all, there aren't easy answers here. Really what we're going to find is there are a lot of questions. So hopefully what we can do is walk away with questions that will be useful for us. So yeah, there is an impact when we shop at some of these big box stores. So what do we know about that impact? Let's think about a common trap is ignorance, or just not knowing, or not getting as curious as we could be. Do I know when I purchase something, how many lives, how many livelihoods are connected to this purchase? If I'm buying something online, that is the RBG earrings or the Black Lives Matter printed shirt, but I'm not ordering it through BLM, I'm ordering it some elsewhere. Do I really know that this product that I'm purchasing that makes me feel excited about the things I care about, is that money going to that? Or is that money going to someone who was like, I see a profitable idea right here? And we also need to ask the questions of, how am I benefiting financially from systemic racism or systemic oppression? And this is a big one. This is very difficult. And it's, again, I use the word insidious. I recently contacted my financial planner. It was new. She and I just started working together recently. And I said, here's one thing that I know. I need to do more on this, but here's one thing that I know. I don't want any of my money invested with companies that produce weapons, and that, either on a small level, or thinking about national defense contracts. I don't want any of my money going to things that can, take human lives. And that's when you start kind of digging through, where is money invested and what does that look like? Being specific about, how do I want my money to flow? What do I want to support? What do I want to not support? And we'll kind of get into this a little bit further. Urgency. Oh crap, I forgot that I wanted to order a gift for so-and-so, and I see them 3 nights from now, and because it's December and we're squeezing, a month's worth of work into 2.5 weeks, I can't run out and get it. So we go, like, what's those places where we can get the last minute? How's that Amazon Prime going to deliver this to my door tomorrow? That urgency, again, puts us out of being mindful and intentional. And this is, if we look at just those 4 bullets that I had around the impact, there's some big, that's big stuff. And sometimes we can feel like, I'm just a single consumer. What can I do? And we actually underestimate our power. And really our power is what we can do. And also then connecting with others and sharing that information so that cumulatively we can all maybe direct our money in different ways to live in the values that we care most about. And now there's a warning, because sometimes when we share these things, we could fall into the trap of being look at me, look at what a good ally I am, look at me patting myself on the back. And then we fall out of the real why of why we're doing this, right? It's not about us, it's about what we can do to dismantle these systems. So as you share, and I hope that you will share this information, I just hope that you'll be thoughtful about how you do it and the conversations that you engage in versus just, I will say, I've certainly been that person, like, hey, putting on social media, like, look at this good stuff that I'm doing. And then I look back and I'm like, oh, cringeworthy, right? Cringeworthy, because sure, I want people to know, but that was more about my ego than about information sharing. So how can we effectively share information with others so we can make a difference while keeping the why at the center? So how do we want to do this? I have, I'm going to drop it in the chat. And I do think, sorry, I'm trying to find my cursor between 2 screens. And I'm struggling. Oh, here it is. Ugh, I just had it. Okay, I do have a handout. I know that Sarai and Tandra have it, and it may be part of, I'll figure out a way to get it to y'all.
We can add it in the chat for you, Malia.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Right, getting stuck in the multi-screen world. But I have a handout that'll walk through some of these questions, and I invite you to, download it for yourself. If you're somebody who likes printing and journaling, on that paper, go ahead and do it. Or if you just want to use it as a tool to think about your practices, we'll do that. But the first thing that we want to do is think about, what are my values? Where do I want to direct my money? How do I want it to flow? What's the impact that I care about? And what do I want to make sure my money is not going toward? And this can be difficult. And so I kind of want to walk you through just this tool and this model that I learned through attending a community meeting several years ago from BLM Phoenix. And it was this concept of these different spheres. So this outside sphere is our sphere of concern. It's all of the things that we care about. I know for myself, in around 2016, I was really spinning and I was signing all of these petitions. And then my email inbox was getting things around, I think, the DAPL pipeline and Planned Parenthood and like everything. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do everything. I can't, right? I got stuck in this sphere of concern. There were so many things that I cared about, and it got really overwhelming. But then when we kind of move inward, we can think about, well, where do I have influence? What are some of the organizations that I'm part of and I can direct my giving to? How do I connect with my elected officials? How do I connect with others in my community? Where do I have some influence that could connect to the things I'm concerned and that I care about? And then finally, where is my control? What things do I not just have influence over, but I have control? And really, those are our own behaviors, our own spending patterns, maybe the things that are happening in our household. Some of you are in roles within your organization where you make spending choices about, like, which printing company are we going to use, or what swag are we going to order for this, client thank you gifts that we're creating, or any kind, many, many ways of spending in your organization. So where are you in those decision-making seats? And I think when we can focus on where we have control and influence, we can be more effective, and we can kind of get that overwhelm. If we're just in the spinning in the sphere of concern, right, we can just feel so overwhelmed that we can't even take an effective step forward. So I invite you to inventory all of the things that you care about, and then kind of filter them through where you have influence, where you have some concern, where you have control. And then once you've identified where your values are, kind of just keep that front of mind and start thinking about your practices. Again, we kind of showed the list at the beginning of having some things in mind of some ways that you'd be spending. So as we move through that, some questions as we start thinking about our practices, okay, if I'm an Amazon user often, in general, who's profiting the most by my use there? Do I know where my money is flowing? Do I know this company's values and their social responsibility? And there's the great, there's the website, and then there's the advertising that makes everything sound really great. And of course they do, because that's the job of advertisers and marketing and image consultants. But also, are they really living up to that in the day in and day out? And then as you're learning this, how does that tie back to your values? How does what you're learning, and as you look at your practices, how does that connect? And then really here looking at thinking about going back to, we're all in very different circumstances in our life at any given time. Can I do this right now? Is this a good choice for me right now? Because sometimes ease, while it could be a trap, it might be absolutely necessary. And that's why I said these are considerations and not shoulds, right? But just things to be thinking about. Do I have the capacity to do this at this time? Let's see. I see there's a question in here, so I just want to peek at them. Effective charter schools, I see that question. Unintentional. What did I think of major issue and bias? Does being not aware excuse the behavior? I am going to answer that one really quick. I will say the school question is probably a little out of my wheelhouse, but I'll welcome some other folks. But does being unaware excuse behavior? And I would say only to a point, right? Because there's enough happening that we are lifelong learners in things that we are interested about and things that we've deemed valuable, right? So being unaware is, I've not deemed this valuable. And if I stay unaware, I'm continuing to say this isn't important to me. So unaware is part of it, but very much when we have something that goes from implicit bias and all of a sudden we're aware of it, once it's been raised, we can't unraise it. So now we have to do something with that knowledge. So it's saying, okay, at one point I was unaware. Now I have knowledge. I don't know what to do with it. That can be a very fearful space, right? That can be very overwhelming. And we have to think of, how do I move through this fear and find out, what do I need to know? What skills do I need to learn? How can I learn that? So I think that's a great question. I think there's a lot in there that we could do an entire other webinar on, but I did kind of want to acknowledge that. So thank you, Martina, for your question. I appreciate that.
Malia, I just want to jump in really quick. We've been getting some questions that are more aligned with redlining. So I did want to jump in. I know that the video that was shown can kind of lend to a discussion around redlining, but we really wanted to look at it more from a system perspective and how some of the discussion that Malia is having today with regard to where and how we spend our money impacts the systems that we live in. I will tell you that in reviewing the questions that have come in, we are going to host a webinar on redlining next year. We'll find us an expert to come in and speak on that, but we really want to make sure that we focus on the content that Malia has prepared for us today. So I just wanted to plug that in really quick to let people know that your questions will be answered. They won't be overlooked, but we want to really talk about the consumerism today. So thank you all. And thank you for that brief pause, Malia.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I do think one of the resources that I had shared, and I will say I haven't read the book yet. I'm actually picking it up on Saturday. But there's a new book that has only been published about a month ago called Wallet Activism. And I do think that there are, from what I've read kind of in the book description, there's some things about even the choices of where we live, where we're paying rent, or where we're purchasing real estate, how that contributes to our values. So I would encourage you to check out Wallet Activism by Tanya Hester, because that might also kind of lead into some of that. I will say when it comes to redlining, I know little other than my understanding of, I can see how it contributed. But yeah, and I do like this, the metaphor of if you're speeding and you didn't know the speed limit, you're still gonna get a ticket. So, right, we're not absolved just because it's like, well, I thought it was 45 here. No, it's less. So thank you. That's a helpful metaphor. I think I'm very much a fan of metaphors of how can like those relate. So appreciate that. So like I said, here are some questions to consider as you assess your practices. And when we think about our practices, with what we know now, and also we're going, if each of us kind of take on in the ways that we can, biting off as much as we can chew, knowing like of my practices, what is upholding and what is disrupting systemic oppression. And as I think about that, when I change, recognizing the cumulative impact when we think about all consumers, if all of consumers continue to uphold, right, it's just going to continue to exacerbate that impact that we talked about earlier. But if we start to dismantle, and many of us actually start to make some different choices and a little more intentional choices, ooh, what could happen there, right? That's where some of that power is. So I love that element of thinking about how the tides can turn to greater equity and rebalancing of systems that have not been fair. And then we want to explore some possibilities. So what might be some places to start? I always think like if you can see an opportunity where you can have a win early, go for it, right? That win is going to go like, oh, great. Like I actually, instead of ordering or going to a big box store, I went to the local bookstore. It was it's owned by a woman of color. I bought a book there. That is a redistribution of wealth. I mean, maybe it was a $16.95 book. It is still a redistribution of wealth. And it's also keeping your money and that tax and that sales tax in your own community. You're keeping it locally. So identify for yourself what some early wins could be. And you'll see like, oh, well, that wasn't so hard. If I could do that, maybe I could go to the next level. Maybe I could add some depth. So I know like here, I just identified bookstores. I know sometimes people talk about clothing, really like thrifting, repurposing. The fast fashion and disposable fashion industry is one of the worst for our planet, and also is a place where we see a lot of labor rights being abused. So there's ThredUp. Like you can thrift online. Like you don't even have to go into a store. You can thrift online with ThredUp. Or you can thrift with, and I will say this is still out of my price range, but a friend of mine is like, oh, I like to go to the Real. And I'm like, great, I'll take your hand-me-downs when you're done with them. ThredUp is really more kind of my lane, but thinking about how can things be repurposed. Jewelry, gems, I'm a woo person. I really love having crystals in my home and reading what they're about and how they can change the energy of my home. And it took me some time to recognize that actually, again, how is this taken from the earth? What is the extraction process? Was this an ethically sourced crystal? Were these ethically sourced gemstones? What do I know about that? Now too, with the idea of, kind of lab created gemstones, I think is really a way to look at this sustainability issue and say, we can create something that's beautiful and it doesn't have to harm our earth in the process. Travel. If you're going to travel to a new town that you've never been to, a new city, a new place, like how do you support the local economy when you get there? It's easy sometimes with like the big hotel chains, that money might actually not really be staying in that community other than those hotel employees who are earning money and being able to do that, but that money might be going elsewhere. So what are the local restaurants? What are the places where you can go? Are there BIPOC owned stores and restaurants and places to check things out, even when you travel, not just when you're local? And food and beverage, I know someone who works in the coffee industry and even the specialty coffee industry. And she's talked about how sometimes customers will be like, wow, this nearly $5 cup of coffee, that's really expensive. And the folks that work on her staff say, if we really looked at is every person who's been involved from planting the seeds of the plants to get the coffee beans, if we thought of every person from who's planting the seeds, who's harvesting them, who's moving them from the mountains into the city to be packaged and shipped, and who's moving them to the roasters, if we think of every livelihood and every person who's connected with that, and if they were paid livable wages, if they were paid full-time rates, if they had union protection and full benefits, that cup of coffee would cost a lot more. So we can see that there is injustice in these things that we experience. So thinking about that process, to the point I had shared in our cafe, there's a young adult book that I was reading, and they were kind of saying a similar story around the cost of a t-shirt. Right, this t-shirt costs it's so expensive, and the friend was saying, well, that's because no one was exploited at any part of the design of the design, the cutting, the pattern making, the fabrication of the shirt, the farm, the small scale farm where the people grew the materials. And it's what's hard is to say, like, what, we actually live in a society right now where it's the wealthy have the opportunity to be more ethical. Right. And we want to flip that, right? We want to shift that. We want to change that dynamic. So looking again, I told you I'd share some of the wisdom from University of Phoenix folks from earlier in the month. So we said, thinking about small business and social media. So someone had shared about how they often find great pop-ups from individual owners, from artisans, from different folks by following them on Instagram and seeing what they're going. And that we as consumers, we don't have to be an influencer to make a difference with a small business. Any post or any comment that we share anywhere online is a boost for that business. So go ahead and shout out those places that you find that you love and talk about them, because that's going to elevate their the awareness of other folks knowing about a small business. Others were thinking about it's gotten to the point where you can easily search on Yelp, on Etsy. Man, Google can be our best friend in this. I want to find an indigenous owned restaurant to go to tonight, or I want to look for a woman owned, a Latina owned jewelry designer on Etsy to find a gift. Using the search bar and just putting that in can open up worlds for you. Learning more about what's called B Corp. And I think I can share it as a resource. I think it might be connected in some of the resources I said, but maybe it might be a couple clicks through. But B Corp is a new, I shouldn't say new, I don't know how new it is, but it's kind of this standard that companies that want to be labeled as B Corps live up to a certain standard in terms of their sustainability, in terms of their employment practices, in terms of their wages, but it's really about this kind of accountability space for social responsibility. Some folks are, again, talking about sustainability. what are organizations that are actually investing in replacing or even growing their own goods of the things that they utilize? So if we're thinking about the earth and what we do, that we're actually replacing and replenishing as we go. We kind of talked about thrifting and repurposing already. Oh, my mom volunteers at a thrift store. So my jewelry today, and most of it, she's like, I saw this and I thought of you. I thought this and I thought of you. And it's lovely. And it's kind of like, okay, mom, chill out. But thrifting is great. And you can find, little fun things if you like it. And finally, I'm not going to sit here and tell you today that I don't use Amazon. On occasion, I do. And it's like, I do try to be really intentional about what and when, but there are also ways to kind of add some depth and add some, I don't know, the word is virtue to it, but Amazon also offers the version of Amazon Smile. So if you can set up an Amazon Smile account, you can dedicate a nonprofit that is within their system. And then the purchases that you make, a percentage will then go to those nonprofits. So it's a way to continue to think about your spending. Or some folks were sharing about like, I shop on Amazon. I look for what I need. And then I look at that product and I think, does that product, does their manufacturer have their own website? And could I order directly from them? So it's almost like Amazon is the research arm, and then they go and buy direct from the company. So there are different ways to think about your practices. I want to share one more thing. Oh, the questions to explore are here, but they're also on the handout that you have. So I'm going to kind of move through that. And I want to talk about charitable giving just very briefly. And
I'm sorry to interrupt. Before we move forward, because we have a question that was aligned with what you were just speaking about. And you did kind of touch on it, but I wanted to make sure that I asked, as it was in the chat. So the question was, how do you respond to how the big box stores and companies, which have put mom and pop stores or small businesses out of existence, unfortunately, how they provide jobs, though low paying and with no benefits, to so many living in poverty or near poverty? And then they say tough one, I think. So I just wanted to, sorry to interrupt, want to get your thoughts on that, because it kind of aligned with what you were talking about with Amazon and the small businesses.
Mm-hmm. So I think the question was, how do I respond? Honestly, my response is like, right. Like, it's complicated, right? There's so many levels to this. So there's the part where we say like, yeah, jobs are great. But then there's also this like bitter taste about like the jobs are low paying and these folks are still potentially having to work multiple jobs and they don't have benefits. So, I mean, my response personally as a single human being is I'm not crazy about it. I get very frustrated by it. And I think there's some complexity there. I will say I have started to see some of these large companies, I think that they are taking steps, right? Some of it might be because, right, there's enough social pressure now from consumers saying, this isn't right. And we're not okay with this anymore. I have seen some steps, not as rapid or as significant as I would like, but I have seen some steps of organizations starting to say, what could we do differently? But my response, and maybe similar to you, is that like, I'm not pleased, I'm not satisfied. I would say I'm not yet satisfied. And I think there's room for growth, room for improvement, room for, again, turning these tides. So thank you for that question. And then we're moving through here. Kevin Bacon, and I say 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon in charitable giving, thinking about the different ways we can give and the different ways of what it takes. Sometimes there might be some level of degrees before our gift or investment actually impacts a human life. So some of the ways that we give are going to directly go to supporting folks who are experiencing marginalization. Some gifts that we give are going to be higher level, and it's going to take some time for those gifts to take action. So thinking of the advocacy, thinking of the education and the arts work, those are important, right? Those are important organizations to support. And there's a bit of a trickle down effect before it gets to kind of the change that folks who are experiencing oppression and are experiencing marginalization need to see. We're supporting organizations that do direct service, or the grassroots, right, who are right there working with the folks who are saying, like, you're closest to the problem. You have the answers. But as it stands currently, you probably don't have the power, the influence, or the resources to enact those answers. So how do we change that? Or, some of these community and faith-based organizations that are really building relationship, that's more direct. So I just wanted to kind of paint that picture of there are many ways to be charitable, and they're all necessary. They all matter. So where you can, if you can diversify so that we can be contributing money to organizations that are advocating and changing laws and changing some of these systems and starting to break things down, that's great. And in the meantime, we also need the support for people who are saying, let me make sure you have housing. Let me make sure you have food security. Let me make sure that you've got your needs met to, survive and hopefully thrive through another day, another year as we move forward. And the last thing we want to do is we want to stick with it, right? How do we keep peeling away at the onion, thinking about what we can do to move forward? Where are my easy wins today? Maybe not easy, but path of least resistance wins today. And then as we do that, how do we go deeper? How do we add depth? How do I start looking at bigger picture of the interconnectedness of this stuff? Like I said, I have a ton of resources. Some of them have been shared in advance. I will throw some more to Sarai and Tandra to share out with you again. But I would love to, with the time we have left, more questions. I know some came in as we were going. If you've got questions or if you've got ideas, I'll even spend a little time the chat moved really quickly. So I'll kind of move through and see if there's plenty of, I will say this, not if there's stuff to share. There's plenty of stuff to share in here. Oh yeah, Kevin Bacon's still hot. Yep, he still got it. Love this. But yeah, I see a lot of great, again, the wisdom of all of you together. Let's see how many participants. So when I saw earlier, it was like around more than 80. Like all of us together with, here's something that I do that I found effective. Here's something else. Here's a place to look. The wisdom of the group is always better than any one of us. So that's why I really hope that we can spend some time looking at other shares and seeing, like, what are we curious about? Which of these elements, like what lit a fire in you? Might not have been everything, but where you found that fire, oh man, that's the place to go first. That's the place to draw first, because you're going to feel that excitement and that satisfaction when you work from that place of fire and enthusiasm. Let's see, scrolling through. Sarai, Tandra, anything else that you saw? I feel like I just was talking a mile a minute. I wanted to, give you a bunch, grab what feels good, take what's useful, discard what is not, and just deep appreciation, sharing, sending joy, sending love, sending peace and comfort, sending warmth, and, space and time for each of you to reflect through the end of this year, take care of your needs, be kind to yourself, be kind to others. I'm grateful to have this chance to connect with you.
Thank you, Malia. That was great. This hour flew by. It absolutely flew by. The information was fantastic. I love the way in which you framed it. I hope that everyone is walking away with as much information as I am. I'm definitely probably going to go back and revisit whenever we're running these webinars and participating and engaging with you all and the speaker. We sometimes miss some things, and I definitely don't want to miss anything from this session. Thank you all for all of the resources that you shared in the chat. I do have to say there was a little warmth of my heart when I saw that one of my best friend's family's educational store was shared in LA. So that was great to see. I can't wait to share that with her and the legacy that her grandmother has left there. We do ask that you come back and join us next year for that webinar that I mentioned at the very beginning of the session today. Also want to let you know and remind you again that we did have a lot of questions and a lot of context related to redlining. And we do have a speaker in mind for that. So we'll definitely be bringing that back mid-year for 2022. So we're looking forward to that. The recording of this session will be sent out to all of you probably within the next week or so. We ask that you come back and join us, follow Malia and her work. Thank you so much, Malia, for providing us with this content at this time of year. We wish you all a happy holiday season for whatever it is that you celebrate. Please stay safe and take care. Bye-bye.